Good morning, everyone. Today our lecture is Nutrition, Metabolism, Thermoregulation. So let us discuss. So when we talk about the metabolism, we should understand that it includes two main processes. It's a catabolism and anabolism. So catabolism, it is the energy-releasing reaction resulting from the breaking down of the large molecules to the smaller one. For instance, breaking down of glycogen to the glucose. Indigested food is a source of molecule used in a catabolic reaction. So due to the catabolic, we are going to receive this energy. Generally, this energy will be used for producing synthesis of the ATP. Further, this ATP will be used for anabolic process. Anabolism is energy requiring reaction that joins smaller molecule to form larger one. Anabolic reaction results in a synthesis of the molecules necessary for the life. For instance, in our body, will synthesize amino acids will connect to each other and together they will build a protein. The third process is ATP breakdown. The energy released from the breakdown of ATP can be used during the anabolism to synthesize other molecules and to provide energy for the cellular process such as active transport and muscle contraction. So in this slide, we could see how smallest organic molecules like amino acids, lipids, and simple sugars. This is our nutrition pool. First of all, we can use for anabolic processes. It is maintains and repairs for growth, for secretion, for storing of nutrients, and further, when the smaller nutrients will build together the biggest one, they will use for catabolism. And as a result, after the catabolism, we once more are going to receive our nutrition pool. So this nutrition pool could be used for producing of the ATP energy. Through the anaerobic processes, we are going to receive small amount of ATP. The biggest amount of ATP we'll receive after the aerobic metabolism, which will happen inside of the mitochondria. You could say about 60% of that energy will be used for heat producing, and 40% for production of this ATP will be used for contraction of the muscles, for locomotion, for cytokinesis, endocytosis, exocytosis, and different kind of transport function of the body. So nutrients, it's indigest chemical used for growth, repair, and for maintenance. Macronutrients consumed in large ones. It's the proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. Micronutrients needed in a small amount. When I talk about the nutrition, we also should mention about the recommended daily allowance, how many nutrients our body required. Safe estimate of daily intake for standard needs. Essential nutrients cannot be synthesized in our bodies. That is why we need to get them from the food. So the essential nutrition presented by the minerals, vitamins, 8 amino acids, and 1 and 3 fat acids must be consumed in a diet. The first nutrition which we are going to discuss, it will be carbohydrates. They are found in 3 places in the body. It's a muscle, in the liver, and in the liver. There will be stored the glycogen and the blood sugar. Most carbohydrates serve as a fuel. Neurons and RBC depends on the glucose, like it's and this is their fuel. Sugars do not serve as structural components. Blood glucose carefully regulated by insulin and glucagon and the hormones released from the pancreas. So the RDA for carbohydrates is great than other nutrition. It should be 175 grams per day. Dietary sources of the carbohydrates, for example, monosaccharides presented by glucose, galactose, and fructose. Liver will convert this galactose and fructose to the glucose. Outside the hepatic portal system, only blood sugar is glucose. Normal blood sugar concentration range from 70 to 110 milligrams per deciliter. These saccharides like sucrose, maltose, and lactose, and the polysaccharides presented by starch, glycogen, and cellulose. So dietary fibers. Fibrous material that resist digestion. Fibers is important to the diet at approximately 30 grams per day. Excess interferes with the mineral absorption. They're responsible, like iron. Water-soluble fibers, for example, pectin, is responsible to decrease blood cholesterol and the level of low-density lipids. Water-insoluble fibers presented by cellulose or lignin. They're responsible for absorption of water in the intestine to soften softness of stool, give acid bulk, and speed transmit time in a large intestine. So carbohydrates uses. So monosaccharides they absorbed include fructose, galactose, and glucose. So we could see glucose, these monosaccharides. Oh, I'm sorry. Monosaccharides we could use for glucogenesis, for producing of glycogen, which will store in a liver or in the skeletal muscles. Some of the excess amount of monosaccharides will deliver to the adipose tissue and used for lipogenesis, and it's stored in the adipose tissue in a condition of the fat. And then another one will be used by catabolic processes, after which respiration, after which we are going to receive the energy. Lipids. Average adult level of adipocyte in the body for males it's about 15%, for female it's approximately 25%. Mainly, lipids is that they're responsible for storing. They will store in our body in adipose tissue, and they will respond body store of energy. Also, when we talk about the lipids, we should mention about the fat-soluble vitamins like A, D, A, and K, which absorb with the dietary fat. And in the just less than 10 grams per day of the lipids could lead to the risk of the deficiency of this kind of vitamins. Function of the lipids, it's structural. For example, phospholipids and cholesterol is a component of the plasma membrane and myelin sheath when we discuss about the nerve fibers. Chemical precursors like cholesterol is a precursor of steroid hormones, it's a precursor of the bile cells and vitamin D. Fat acids are precursors of prostaglandins and other eicosanoids. So, fat requirements and sources should be less than 30% of daily calorie intake. Most fat acid synthesis invite the body, like essential fat acids must be consumed. Saturated fats, it's example of the saturated fats, it's animal origin like meat, egg, or egg yolks and dairy products. Unsaturated fats presented in the plants like nuts, seeds, and most vegetable oils. Cholesterol we could find in egg yolks, cream, shellfish, or organ meats, and other meats. So when we talk lipids transport in the blood in a condition and composition with as lipoproteins. Protein and phospholipid count around the hydrophobic cholesterol and triglyceride core. When we talk about the serum lipoproteins, we need to categorize them in 4 groups. It depends on their density. It's a kilomicrons, which mainly will catch the triglycerides, mainly they will consist of triglycerides from the digestive system, and by the lymphatic system they will deliver first of all lipids to the liver. Then very low density lipids, and high density lipids. When we talk about this categories of very low density and high density lipids, we mainly mean the structural composition, how many proteins they have. For example, when I talk about the kilomicrons, they have only 2% of the proteins, and after that very low density lipids have only 8% of proteins. Low density and high density lipids, they will have bigger percentages of proteins. So that lipoproteins which have higher percentages of proteins will have high density. Also, you could see in this slide that they have a different ratio of the triglycerides and cholesterol. Mainly, triglycerides will include kilomicrons. Then its level is going to decrease in another type of the lipoproteins. You could see about 55% will be present in a very low density lipids and about 5% only in a high density lipids. But in a high density lipids, we will find high level of cholesterol and phospholipids, and in very low density lipids, only 20% of it and 17% of phospholipids. So let us discuss about the transport of the lipids. So first of all, Liver is going to absorb chylomicrons, which will deliver these 90% of triglycerides from the digestive system. Inside of the liver, chylomicrons will release triglycerides. Triglycerides will connect with now with the low density lipids and release to the bloodstream. This low density lipids, they're going to deliver triglycerides, mainly cholesterol and phospholipids, to the cell. Inside of the cell, this cholesterol and phospholipids will be used for producing of the membrane, plasma membrane, and other metabolic processes. What's very important, the cell is also responsible for producing of the cholesterol. So excess amount of this cholesterol, which is going to, which will be present inside of the cell, will release from the cell in a combination with the high density lipids. Now, high density lipids are going to deliver lipids back to the liver, and this is example of recycle of the cholesterol and other kind of lipids. Very low density lipids, so they also will release from the liver, but mainly they are going to deliver lipids to the adipose tissue. It's their function. And low density lipids will be responsible to deliver lipids to the different kinds of cell in our body. Cholesterol. Total cholesterol in the blood should be less than 200 milligrams per deciliter. Most cholesterol is endogenous. Dietary restriction, low blood cholesterol level should be by 5% with restriction of the dietary cholesterol, and by 15 and 20% with certain saturated fats, which are mainly saturated fats, which are mainly present in a meat. Vigorous exercise also responsible to lower blood cholesterol. High level of the cholesterol could lead to situation. It could lead to situation that in a blood also will increase level of the low density lipids and very low density lipids. Together, this combination of the high level of lipids in the bloodstream will lead to the pathophysiological process, which first of all is going to destroy the endothelium of the vessels and lead to the atherosclerosis. Further, the next step of the atherosclerosis is the arterial hypertension, and the adverse effect of arterial hypertension and this atherosclerosis, it could be a heart attack. So generally, it's very important to control the level of cholesterol in the blood, and mainly to look on the diet the person is going to eat in case to decrease this level of saturated fats in your daily food intake. So desirable lipoprotein levels. So high level of high density lipids indicate cholesterol is being removed from the artery. So it's a good, we could name that high density lipids, it's some kind of good cholesterol. Low levels of low density lipids, very important. If we have in the blood a high level of low density lipid, it will correlate with the cholesterol deposition in the arteries, which further will lead to the atherosclerosis. What kind of recommendation we could give person with a high level of the low density lipids and cholesterol? Exercise regularly, avoiding smoking, saturated fats, coffee, and stress. Now let us move to another type of nutrition. It's the proteins. 12–15% of body mass is mainly presented by the proteins, mostly in the skeletal muscles. The main function of proteins is like muscle contraction, movement of body, cell structure, cell membrane like receptors, cell identity, and different kind of pumps like ion channels. Fibrous proteins like collagen, creatinine, their function is a structural function. Globular proteins like antibodies, myoglobin, different kinds of enzymes which are present in the digestive system, in the cell metabolism. It's responsible also proteins which are present in the blood and responsible for narcotic blood pressure. Plasma protein, like responsible for the blood osmolarity and its viscosity. Also that proteins which are responsible for blood clotting. So we could find protein everywhere in different kinds of system in our body, and we could see that it play very important role, a structural role like a collagen, muscles, and as functional role like proteins in the blood for responsible for narcotic system, for clotting factors, for immune system, example antibodies. So, requirements for the proteins. Daily recommendation of the protein should be approximately 45-60 grams per day. Nutritional value depends on proportion of the amino acids. So, as we told, there is 8 essential amino acids which are not synthesized in our body, so we need to take them in our dietary food. It's an example of this 8 essential amino acids is isoleucine, leucine, lysine, methionine, phenylalanine, threonine, tryptophan, and valine. Cell do not store the protein, what's very important. So that is why we daily need to eat some different kinds of proteins. Complete proteins supply all amino acids in the right amount needed to synthesis of proteins. So, animal proteins presented in the meat, in the eggs, and in dairy, complete proteins. Plant source must be combined in the right proportion. Example of the plant's proteins, it could be beans, rice, a complementary choice. Nitrogen balance. Rate of nitrogen in digestion equals rate of its excretion. Proteins are chief dietary source of nitrogen. Excretion chiefly as nitrogenous wastes. Positive nitrogen balance occurs in the children. They digest more than they excrete, promoted by growth and growth function and the sex hormones. Negative nitrogen balance, it's body proteins being broken down for fuel. Like example of this negative nitrogen balance, it is muscle atrophy. Glucocorticoids, they could promote also catabolism of the proteins. It means they are breaking down to the level of amino acids. Minerals, the function of the minerals. For example, calcium and phosphorus are responsible for maintaining strength of the bones and the teeth. Phosphorus is a part of the phospholipids, take part in producing of ATP, example of the buffer system. Calcium, iron, magnesium, it's a cofactors for enzymes. Without them, enzymes will not capable to produce their function. Iron is essential for the hemoglobin and myoglobin for transport delivering of oxygen. Chlorine is a component of the stomach acid. Mineral cells like electrolytes govern function of the nerve and muscle cells, regulate distribution of the body water. In the next slide, presented like dietary source of minerals. It is vegetables, legumes, milk, eggs, fish. Animal tissue contain large amount of salt. Recommendation sodium intake, it's about approximately 1.1 gram per day. And you could compare here with a typical American diet contains, which it's about 4.5 gram per day. It's rather higher than it should be presented in our daily food intake. Okay, so maybe your minerals is presented here. Also, you could see their function, recommendation dosage, and to what kind of deficiencies they could lead. Main minerals is that minerals which requires our body more than 100 milligrams per day. Besides that, there is a trace minerals. So as this minerals body requires less than 100 milligrams per day. Example of the trace minerals included here, it's a copper, iodine, chromium, selenium, zinc, magnesium, but you should understand that they have very important functions. They to some extent they are cofactors of enzymes. They take part in producing of hormones like iodine for producing of thyroid hormones. So generally, nevertheless, our body requires them a less amount, but they have very important and useful function of the body. So, for example, we could see here like zinc. Its function component of a different kind of enzymes involved in digestive and respiration. Selenium is a component of certain enzymes and also take part in to some extent producing of the thyroid hormones. Iron is a part of the hemoglobin, formation of the vitamin A. So you could look through this all vitamins, trace elements, and understand that you read at home when in home condition all these vitamins, their daily recommendation, and what kind of deficiencies they could lead. Okay, vitamins. Vitamins is organic compounds that are essential for normal metabolic processes. Vitamins cannot be synthesized by your body cells in adequate amounts. Vitamins will classify to the fat-soluble vitamins and water-soluble vitamins. Vitamin fallacies and facts. So more vitamins fallacy. The more vitamins, the better. Fact: too much of water-soluble vitamins result in excretion of the vitamins through the urination. Too much of fat-soluble vitamins could be harmful to our body. Vitamin provides energy. Generally, vitamins do not directly supply energy. They aid in the release of energy from carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. So it means they do not have direct function on producing of energy, but indirectly they affect it. A right diet provides all need vitamins. Many people do need vitamin supplement, particularly pregnant and breastfeeding women. But generally, if the food is variety, you do not need sufficient additional amount of vitamin supplement. Fat-soluble vitamins, the slow in the fats are influenced by the lipids. They take part by cell promote fat-soluble vitamin absorption. They are fairly resistant to the heat. Examples of the fat-soluble vitamins, it's A, D, E, and K. So, what their functions? For example, vitamin A is responsible for antioxidant function, for synthesis of visual pigment, for mucoproteins, for a normal development of bones and teeth. Vitamin D promotes absorption of calcium and phosphorus, which promote development of the teeth and bone. Vitamin E is an antioxidant which prevents oxidation of the vitamin A, and polyunsaturated fatty acid may help to maintain stability of the cell membrane. Vitamin K take part in blood clotting function, so it's responsible for clotting coagulation processes. Water-soluble vitamins include vitamin B and vitamin C. During the cooking and food processing, they could destroy. B vitamins, 6 of them, are several compounds of essential of normal cell metabolism and known as the vitamin B complex. For instance, vitamin B1 is a part of coenzyme requires for oxidation of carbohydrates. Vitamin B6 coenzyme requires for synthesis of proteins and very different kinds of amino acids. Vitamin B12 is a part of coenzyme required for synthesis of nucleic acid for metabolism, and carbohydrates play a role in myelin synthesis required for the normal blood cell producing. Vitamin C requires for collagen production, conservation of folic acid, and metabolism of certain amino acids, absorption of iron, and synthesis of hormones from the cholesterol. Folic acids, vitamin B9, it's a coenzyme of different kinds of metabolic processes of a certain of amino acids and for DNA synthesis. So, energy balance and its measurement. So, generally, when we talk about energy balance, it should be equal between our energy in food. It mainly what kind of food and how many food person intake and energy output. So, how many you could see that 50% of energy in food, it's energy which produces our body will use for heat reduction, and about another 50 for different kinds of work. It could be mechanical work, it could be different kind of movement. It's a work, it's example of the work, it's a transport of the different kind of transport of the nutrients, synthesis responsible for the growing processes, and energy storing. So when we have the energy balance will be equal, so mainly the person will not gain or lose the weight. In case when we have the dominant energy in food, I mean person eat a lot of food, for example, but energy output will be less, mainly some mechanical work, movement will reduce. So generally, person does not use a huge amount of energy, it will be easier for person to gain the weight. And vice versa situation. When we have the restriction of the food intake and increase energy output, increase for example, percentages of work, mainly our physical activity, it will lead to situation and the person is going to lose weight. So energy input, like the energy content of the food. So lipids release about 9.3 kilocalories per gram, carbohydrates release about, and proteins released equal, about 4.1 kilocalories per gram. Calorimetry is a measurement of total energy released when bonds of the organic molecule are broken. Food is burned with oxygen and water in a calorimeter. So generally, if you're interested to count how many you intake lipids, carbohydrates, and proteins, and how many in a kilocalories is presented, you need to count grams of that amount of proteins, fats, and lipids, and multiply it in these indexes. So, for example, typical daily food. If during the day a person eats about 50 grams of lipids, so generally it will be 465 kilocalories. Carbohydrates, 400 carbohydrates, it will be equal to 1060 1600 kilocalories of carbohydrates. Total, it will be equal to approximately 2515 kilocalories. Energy output. So for what processes our body was going to use the energy? It's basic metabolic rate. It's mainly maintain your basic life processes like respiration, heart beating. Approximately body uses 130-180 kilocalories. External work is mainly represented by your physical activity. Approximately 500-1000 kilocalories. And calorigenic effect of food, it's 15-30% of BMI. You should understand that a different type of food requires different level of energy, which will be used for digestion. If you will eat apple, for example, only apple, so logically calorigenic effect of food will be very low. But if you will have a very big meal, which contains pizza, cake, Coca-Cola, I don't know, a lot of food, logically, calorigenic effect of food will be high. It means the digestive system requires a lot of energy to digest this kind of food. Okay, let us move on. Energy expenditure, so metabolic rate. So clinicians examine metabolism to determine calories used and measured. So calories per hour, calories per day, and calories per unit body weight per day. Metabolic rate is the sum of all anabolic and catabolic processes in the body, which could change according to the activity. Mainly, it's presented by physical activity. For example, in this slide, you could see how many kilocalories will use your body for producing different kind of physical activity. So here we have estimated calories expended by a person which is weight 70 kilograms. So for walking, a person could use about 200 kilocalories per hour. For example, for jogging, person could use about approximately 600 kilocalories per hour. Basic metabolic rate is the minimum resting energy expenditure on a awake and an altered person. Measurement of BMR involves monitoring respiratory activities. Energy utilization is proportional to oxygen. Energy utilization is proportional to oxygen consumption. If daily energy intake exceeds energy demands, body stores this excess energy as triglyceride in adipose tissue, and person is going to gain the weight. If daily calorie expenditure exceeds dietary supply, the body will use energy reserves, energy store, and in this case, person is going to lose weight. How hormones could affect on our metabolic rate? For example, thyroxine control overall processes. It's mainly has the catabolic effect on the lipids and on the carbohydrates. Cholecystokinin and adrenocorticotropic hormones, they're responsible for suppressing of appetite, so person will not eat more than, for instance, as could. Leptin is a hormone which is released by adipose tissue during the absorptive state of digestion and binds to the central nervous system in the hypothalamus, and is also responsible to suppress the appetite. But people who have their overweight, they have a high level of leptin, which will lead to the leptinemia, and as a result, the receptors in the hypothalamus will be resistant to this leptin. So they will have the disturbance with the control of appetite and satiety. Ghrelin is released by empty stomach and responsible to increase appetite. Basic metabolic table method. So you could find approximate by the age of the person, approximate height, weight, and you could, as a result, receive the approximate amount of BMR which could have personally, depending on the sex, male or female. Indirect calorimetry mainly used requires the value of the carbon dioxide and oxygen, and by these values we could count by respiratory coefficients. We could count the value of BMR. So we need the volume of oxygen multiply on the caloric equivalent of oxygen, which is range from 4.7 to 5.1. So here it's given the respiratory coefficient which we have, and by that formula we could count it. Humans thermoregulation. In a human's body, temperature is mainly relieved constant. The usual temperature is approximately 36.8. In the body, heat gain should be equal to the heat loss. This process will be called thermoregulation, used to describe the process which maintains the balance between the production of the heat and releasing of it. So how we can heat gain? By through the metabolic processes, different kinds of metabolism, especially respiration of the respiration in the liver or muscle tissue. Heat gain from the surrounding by conduction and radiation. How heat is going to lose? By radiation, conduction, convection to the surrounding area, evaporation of water from the skin and lungs, warm air breathed out, and warm urine and feces. How we can thermoregulate? So chemical reaction occur in a cell all over are very heat sensitive. Enzymes that control cellular activity, and they are also heat sensitive. Rising body temperature promotes the heat loss in the body through the blood flow in the skin, through the metabolic rate, through the behavioral response, and through the skin. So when we talk about the blood flow to the skin, how we can, what will happen? In case in situation when the temperature is going to rise, we are going to receive in a skin a situation in the vessels of the skin, a condition of the vasodilatation. So in response to rising temperatures, the body increases blood flow to the skin. This will be controlled by the autonomic nervous system. It will result in increase in the blood flow to the skin, allowing to low heat loss through the radiation, conduction, convection, and evaporation. Promotes cooling of the blood, starting to that will be flow through the skin. The metabolic rate changes through the reduction in secretion of thyroxine. So as a result, thyroxine will not have such catabolic effect, and carbohydrates, fats will not break down, so will not responsible for producing new ATP, which will be used for heat. This also will result in decrease in the metabolic rate. And when metabolic rate decrease, logically less amount of heat will be produced. Behavioral response, we change our behavioral response by staying still, decrease activity, staying in a shade or in an air conditioned area, or wearing less clothing. Sweat is controlled by a sympathetic nervous system. It's secreted from the sweat glands to the skin. Sweat contains sodium chloride urea, which will be released from the sweat glands in the surface of the skin. Sweat cools by evaporating from the body. Sweat doesn't work in a humid environment. Environment temperature bigger will lead to the body temperature for the sweating to be effective. So in this slide, you could see situation when very little heat loss and increased heat loss due to the high temperature. So, well, the situation of the vasodilatation of the capillaries of vessels. In this case, the heat will lose by radiation and by increased function of the sweat glands, evaporation of the sweat. Okay, what will happen in situation when temperature is going to decrease? So we also will have receive changing in a blood flow to the skin, changing in a metabolic rate, in an example process of shivering, and also changes in behavioral response. In response to falling temperatures, the body restricts blood flow to the skin. This process will lead to the vasoconstriction. It's controlled by a sympathetic nervous system. Decrease blood flow to the skin from internal organs, which decrease the transfer of the heat from internal organs to the skin. This will allow less heat to be lost from the body's surface, so the skin is going to be cool, and in this in this way, internal organs are going to store that heat inside of the body. So you could see when the skin was going to when this temperature is going to decrease, we receive vasoconstriction of the vessels, and mainly less heat will released to the skin, so skin will become cool. The hypothalamus and adrenal medulla. The hypothalamus will stimulate the adrenal medulla by sympathetic nervous system. Adrenal medulla will secrete adrenaline and noradrenaline into the blood. These two hormones have a catabolic action on carbohydrates, first of all. So due to the catabolism of the glycogen, we are going to receive the energy ATP, which further is going to use for heat producing. They will increase the cellular metabolism, increase the heat production. In this process will help to maintain the body temperature. The hypothalamus also stimulates the anterior lobe of pituitary gland. The anterior pituitary secretes steroid hormones. We know that thyroxine has also catabolic effect. It will have in all cells in our body. In this case, it will increase our metabolic rate and increase the body temperature. Shivering is actually the rhythmic muscle tremor, occurring at the rate of around 10 to 20 per second. So during the shivering, during this muscle tremor, muscle will contract, and during the muscle contraction, we know that energy will produce and mainly will release. The hypothalamus stimulates part of the brain that increase skeletal muscle tone. This increase body heat production. And how is going to behave? How the behavior is going to change? Crawling into the ball, putting on more clothes, using the different kinds of heating devices. So here you could see in a cold condition, so when the temperature decreases, let us repeat once more, constriction of the vessels in the skin, reducing sweating, shivering, increased voluntary activity, increased metabolic rate. In a heat condition, dilatation of the vessel, redness of skin, sweating, increased surface area by the spreading out, decreased metabolic rate, and decreased voluntary activity. Thank you for your attention. The lecture is over. Goodbye. Have a nice day.